Here, if you could all turn your cameras on. Well, my name is Mariana. I'm a director of Wednesday meetings. Before we begin, I want to make a couple of announcements. First of all, welcome back after the spring semester. I hope everyone was able to recharge and catch up on their work and just ready to go forward. And a couple of events we have this week. This Friday on the 26th from 5 to 6, we'll have a cooking session. So bring your appetite because we are making fettuccine Alfredo via Zoom. So that's supposed to be a fun event. And next Monday, the 29th, join us for CSUN Audit 12 to 1. And if you've missed any of our previous meetings, you can find them on YouTube page at AA CSUN. And now we are going to have Garrett from Bakertilly presenting on building confidence.
All right, thanks, Mariana. I just put a little link in. This is just, we've used these for previous events. I do see some familiar, well, hi Julian, and then I see some familiar names out there as well. So if you guys want to click this link, it's just going to ask for your email address, your name and your email address, just so we can keep track of who attended the event today. So thank you guys all for joining. And let me see if I can I do a screen share here? I think I can't. Nope, I can't. I have no power.
Yes, give me just a second. I'll fix it.
Absolutely. I figured we'd do like a little bit of a chat on building confidence. It's certainly, it's an interesting one. Okay, ready to do it. All right, look at that. All right, we know we want screen 2. That's what we want to share. We're going to do that. Can anyone give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen? Does that work? Sweet. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Joel. All right. I just move this a little bit bigger. So I have you guys on one screen over here and then the presentation on this screen. So building confidence. So this is, I guess if you guys want to give, yep, thumbs up stuff, give me any sort of emoji at all. Has anyone struggled with this, or you feel like this is a difficult topic for you? It gets a little personal, so I apologize. There'll be certain parts of this that you would be uncomfortable to share things with. There will be other parts where I think we all can identify with it, and it's general enough to hide behind it. I'll try to share some of my own personal stories with this. I don't want to spill all of my emotional guts on the floor for all of you to go through, but building confidence to me is a really, really tricky thing. It's very difficult. It is not only for public accounting and recruiting and all that stuff. This spills over into everything we do. So has anyone here just any sort of emoji response at all? So I know if it makes sense. Anyone had any kind of, have you all had your own personal issues with feeling a lack of confidence at different points in your life? Yep, Dixon, yep. Colin, thanks, yep, got it. Stephanie, yep, Tyler, okay. Yeah, so I figured this would be helpful. First, let's see, I think I have to get through, as always, I think we have to have some obligatory, for those of you I have not met, and I see a lot of familiar names and faces here, my name is Garrett. I'm a campus recruiting manager for Bakertilly. This is who we are. Last semester, we were on campus as Squire Milner. I feel like I'm going to have like a solid year or two of reintroducing ourselves as Bakertilly instead of Squire Milner, but a lot of exciting things happening in the firm over just this last 12 months, and especially over these last 6 months or so. So in November 2020, Squire Milner was purchased by Bakertilly. So if you look at this little green map, our colors went from like bright orange, if any of you remember that, to this neon green. So fun stuff all around. The green California didn't exist before. So on November 1st, 2020, this firm Bakertilly bought us in California, and now the firm headquartered in Chicago, spread out east, then to Texas in 2019 and California in 2020. So it's a big firm. So I mean, it's almost, what is it, 4,200 team members throughout the firm in the US. That's a big difference for us. Squire Milner was like a 500 or 600 person firm. So it's interesting to see those numbers get a lot bigger for us. Now, the funny thing to me is still, like, if you talk to like a Deloitte or a PwC, they have like 1,000 people in their LA office, which is like nuts to me. But size is always relative, I suppose, but there's a lot of growth happening for the firm. We're starting to be in more markets and more places. It's crazy for our new hires and our interns this past year. There are so many more opportunities for you within the firm than there was when I joined. In 2013, when I joined as an audit associate, there were maybe 230 people in the firm. So like for me personally, this is like a huge, like, wow, this is different. for people coming into the firm, like any of you guys out there, if you do eventually join the firm, there's a lot of opportunity. It's a really, really exciting time to join the firm because I don't think the growth is slowing down at all. And to me, it was crazy in a pandemic year of 2020 for that growth to keep going. That made me very happy because I mean, I think like most of us in March and April, there's a huge, huge heart attack of like, are these companies going to exist in a matter of months or years? So I think across all of public accounting, all of the firms for the most part are thriving, which is really good to see, at least from all of us who have studied accounting at some point. I think it's nice to know that the companies that you would potentially be joining are alive and strong. So this is a little bit of who we are. The firm actually originated in Wisconsin, but because Chicago is a little bit more of a major financial hub, they moved the headquarters from Madison, Wisconsin to Chicago, Illinois, not too long ago. But the firm grew from there. So let's get to the confidence. How to build confidence, overcoming the fear of failure. There's going to be three kind of. This presentation will be short. For those of you who have seen me present before, I don't like super long presentations. So we're going to do a short little presentation here and then kind of an open Q&A session as best we can. If you want to type questions, that'll work too. I totally understand. This is a topic that's kind of tough to share unless you don't mind, right? So I certainly don't want to force anyone to share any horror stories of having things blow up in your face or lacking confidence. But we'll do the best that we can with the Q&A session after this, all right? So it's really going to be split into three parts of this presentation. Part 2 and 3 are literally one slide, so that's going to go very quickly. The first part that I want to talk about the most is this item number 1, failure itself. So spoiler alert, you're going to fail, and that's okay, right? We're going to spend the bulk of our time here talking about item 1 and then kind of move quickly through 2 and 3 into the questions. Does that sound good? So the failure itself, I think the first step in this is kind of understanding that literally everybody fails in their life. Like, I don't care how successful people are, they fail at different points. And the really interesting thing to me too is even for like the most successful people we can think of, even at their like successful state, they will continue to fail because those kind of people keep trying. And we'll get into this a little bit more, but I think the first thing to me that comforts with building confidence and overcoming that fear of failure is that it's going to happen, like, and everybody does it. Once you realize that, it's kind of like, oh, okay, this, it's not so bad. Like, you live through it and you figure out that you're going to be okay. To me, that's a huge part of it, right? Item 2, effort and attempt. These are like the first steps we'll talk about. To me, these are the hardest ones. Like when you're in your own head and you know that you're petrified of making a mistake, that inaction because of the fear of failure, to me, is the hardest thing to get over. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And we'll close this out with, this is a process. The nice thing about it is we get to rinse and repeat it and we get to try it again every single day of our lives. So, I mean, to me, this is again comforting of knowing like, oh, like something went wrong today and you didn't fix it today. Great. Guess what? You get a chance at it tomorrow again. Right. And that's supposed to be kind of a reassuring thing of no matter what happens, the sun will rise, the sun will set, you will get a chance at this again tomorrow. And sometimes, honestly, the best thing to do is take a break, go to bed, sleep it off, wake up the next day and try to get back at it and try to come with a better effort. Right. Anytime that one's more pertinent for like, I guess for me, I feel like any times I have conflicts in my relationships, whether that's work or whether that's personal life, a lot of those, it's just like, all right, you know what? I was kind of a jerk today. Didn't go the way I wanted it to go. I know I'm a nicer person or a better person than this. I'm going to go to bed and we'll try this again tomorrow. Right. But that's kind of the 3 parts of this that we're going to move through. But again, we're going to spend a lot more time in item number 1. So to me, this cycle of failure or kind of lacking confidence, it's really a cycle to me. And to me, it's also kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Like, does failure happen because you lack confidence, or does the lack of confidence happen because you failed? Right. And it's just kind of like when you get trapped in this, pretty shitty. And it's tough to break out of this. And it's not easy to break out of this. But this for you guys is the most common thing that I see. And it breaks my heart because I think I want to say this loud and clear for all of you. Many of you already know this. The accounting firms that you're speaking with, whether it's us, Bakertilly, or any other firm, I promise you, they are not hiring you because of your accounting experience. Now, I should have, for that, I should have put in here accounting experience. Firms are not hiring you because you have accounting experience. And if you have it on your resume, good for you. I'm not trying to take anything away from your accounting experience that you have on your resume. But if firms wanted to hire people with accounting experience, they would not be hiring from a university. They would be hiring from other accounting firms, from people who have accounting experience. The reason all of these wonderful firms are at CSUN to recruit is not because you have accounting experience, but because you have life experience that has given you certain skills that is going to make you successful at their firms. But in terms of building confidence and overcoming the fear of failure, it starts with no experience. And actually, to be honest with you, the best thing for somebody to build confidence is to be completely blissfully ignorant or unaware that they lack confidence. Some of my favorite people are ones that just, for no reason at all, bound into a situation with a ton of confidence. And it's like, why are you this confident? You don't know what you're doing. And they're like, I don't know. I just feel like I'll figure it out. It's like, they don't even know what they don't know. They don't know that they like, but that ends up being a huge help, because if, for most of you, if you know that you don't have experience, you're in your own head. You're very self-aware. You're very in tune with the fact, oh crap, I don't know what I'm doing. And when that happens, if you don't have, and you know that you don't have experience with something you're trying, what does that mean? It means you have no logical right to be confident in your ability to do something you've never done before, right? But there's a slight rewiring I want to work in here. If you don't have specific experience with something, that's okay. You learn how to do it. We all do that. The confidence here is not that you already know how to do this new thing that you're learning. The confidence is there are other things that you have learned how to do previously, and so that you know how to learn, not that you're confident in being, like, none of you will feel confident that you have the accounting skills of a partner at a firm. But all of you should feel confident that you have the ability to learn those skills to become a great accountant, because you're all going through one of the best accounting programs in California at CSUN. Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm talking? Like, I know it's a slight distinction, but if you can get your brain to start thinking that way instead of I don't have specific experience, that's how you build confidence seemingly out of nothing. But in this cycle, if you have no experience, it means we typically will lack confidence. We won't have confidence in something we haven't done because we've never done it before. And unfortunately, if you don't have confidence, you're very likely to fail. To me, it's the weirdest thing. And this is why I'm saying that, like, blissful ignorance is really helpful. You have to believe in yourself. Even when someone logically says, Nicole, you have no right to feel this confident in something you've never done. But if you just have the confidence, you have to kind of see it to believe it, or you have to believe it to see it in this case, right? If you believe that it's going to work well for you, oftentimes it does, right? If you believe you're going to fail at something, you are most likely going to fail. That confidence that we carry into stuff is so critically important. And yet we talk ourselves out of it, or we let other people say, hey, you know what, Julian, like, you really shouldn't be that confident in this. And it's like, well, screw you. Like, I'm going to be confident. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't fail, but you have to believe in order to get yourself into the right emotional and mental state of trying. And we'll get to that in a second. But if you fail, we'll revisit this concept too, because this is something in the very next slide we're going to work on. Every one of us is wired or pre-wired, however you want to look at it. All of us feel like failure is bad. Kind of a definition of the word, right? So if we're programmed to think this way, we go from having no experience, we have no confidence. And if we have no experience and we don't believe in ourselves, we're going to fail. And if we fail, we know that's bad. So why even try? You know, one really good way to avoid failure, just don't try. Like just a, you know, if a team doesn't, if you don't play, you can't lose. You also can't win. But if you're so concerned about avoiding failure, just don't play. Don't try. If you don't, by the way, if you don't apply for a job at any firm, you'll never get rejected by a firm. So that's great, right? But so this is how that cycle goes. And if you don't try, you don't have the experience, and round and round and round and round we go. And this is brutal and really difficult. All right. So I want to focus on this failure is bad concept. This is for the most part how we feel about things. Now, Gonzaga in the tournament, for you sports fans out there, Gonzaga in this year's March Madness tournament is looking pretty good. But this was back in, I think, 2005 or 2006. I don't remember exactly. I'm not even a big UCLA fan either. But this is two-time NBA champion Adam Morrison in tears on the court after losing to UCLA. He failed, and so he cried about it, right? So this is what when we picture failure, this is one of the things we picture, right? A crumpled up heap on the floor that's just super bummed out and crying and miserable, right? On the other hand, winning a championship like the Lakers did last year, this is good, right? Everyone's happy, we're all smiling, we're posing for pictures in a very basic primitive form. Failure, bad, success, good. That's obvious, right? But what if it wasn't? What if we reprogrammed kind of the failure is bad thing? This is one of my, I don't even know if this quote is real or not. Like, I hope it is. I've seen it on the internet a bunch, but that certainly does not mean it's true. It doesn't even matter, to be honest with you. I'm going to believe this anyway because it makes me feel good. Thomas said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Pretty relatable, right? Like every time I screw something up, I'm like, well, I learned what doesn't work, right? Like even in the like most embarrassing moments of personal failure. I was laid off from my first accounting job, by the way. Like I the crying person, that was literally me after my first job. I did cry. Like in the partner's office, it was very uncomfortable and very awkward. But years later, looking back on this, my honest assessment of the first job in public accounting I found a way that didn't work. Both my effort at that firm was not successful and I needed to change that. And also, to be quite honest with you, the firm was not a good fit for me. So I discovered that the firm wasn't a good fit for me. I eventually joined Squire Milner and found a firm that did fit for me, right? But the point of me sharing this with you is that if you simply tweak this a little bit and try to laugh at it a little bit and say, I didn't fail, I just found a way that didn't work. Like A, you're not being hard on yourself, right? And B, we're reframing failure with a little bit more of a positive connotation, which gets us to some fun with words, right? So again, we are wired to think of failure as bad. Okay, so if failure is bad, if we rewire this a little bit to say, like Thomas Edison is talking about, failure is discovery, right? It's you're discovering what doesn't work. Sometimes it's pretty painful though, right? And if you call failure discovery, well, discovery is kind of sciencey, right? And if you're discovering things, well, you're gaining knowledge, right? And everybody knows that knowledge is good. So at the end of the day, does this mean that failure is good? I kid around a little bit, right? Like I'm not actually hoping that all of you fail in your different endeavors that you do, but in a sense, I am hoping that all of us, when we fail, that there was something we took from that experience, that we gained some knowledge from that experience, and that the failure was not in vain, that the failure was not a pointless exercise. There was something that we gained from this, right? So if we're kind of jokingly saying failure is good, remember everybody fails, right? The only way to avoid failure is never to try. And I told you I wanted to spend most of our time on this first concept of failure itself, tweaking this to get us to understand that failure is gaining knowledge and that's good. That's how you break the cycle of feeling like scared of making a mistake or being scared of failing. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. And again, look, this is very easy for me to sit here and say this. For all of us who have failed at different points in our life, it's a lot harder to live through it, isn't it? So slide number 2, effort and attempt, right? I really liked this picture that I found on the internet for this. To me, the first steps are much like jumping into a pool, like not dipping your toe in. I like this is when I go to the ocean and I go swimming in the ocean, or when I go to a pool, this is still how I approach getting in every single time. Like I really hate walking down steps into a pool because you're gradually trying to get into the cold water, and like I just don't like it. If I just jump in, I have to deal with it right then and there, and then you dive in. Oh my God, that's cold. You surface and breathe, and then go, oh, it's not so bad. I'd lived, right? But that's kind of how I approach getting into water. But I think that's the same way that we ought to approach kind of trying new things. You have to just jump in and figure it out. But again, to me, this is the hardest part. So what happens is the first time that you do this, you need to feel out the failure and your recovery from the failure to realize, oh, okay, it's not so bad. So the next time you come up to meet the firms or anything like that, or networking events, okay, like even if I really screw up, it's not that bad. But this to me is the most, that first step is the most important part. And I guess my advice for all of you would just be like, you got to just jump in. It's gonna suck. Like the first time we do anything is always awkward and really uncomfortable. Like none of us are just amazingly perfect at what we do the first time we try it. Some of us are more successful than others, sure, but your own personal journey you have to have a starting point to know what that feels like in order to know if the next time you do something, if you've done good or if you've done bad based on your now experience, right? So lastly, the cycle of rinse and repeat. How many of you this year went to meet the firms for the very first time? Yep, Julian. Anyone else? Any first timers in 2020 or 2021 for Meet the Firms? How many of you have been to 3 or more Meet the Firms? Nicole, you've been to more than 3 or more? Stephanie, you've been to 3 or more? Okay, I'm gonna ask you guys, what was, if you don't mind, Nicole or Stephanie, if you can share, what was your first Meet the Firms experience like?
Yeah, I can share my experience. My first one was pretty bad. I went in there and I thought I was ready. It was my first time ever recruiting. I went in there with my resume in a vanilla folder. I was dressed to the part and I had practiced, but I was really shy speaking to the recruiters. I didn't know when to jump in when they were like transitioning from students. So I kind of waited the whole time, and at one point I kind of just gave up, went to the food bar like area. There wasn't really anything left, so I was just like, darn it, I didn't even get food. So then I just
It's a good food bar too. So to be in your defense, it is a good food bar.
That was kind of my first experience.
Mm-hmm. Stephanie, what about you? What was your first experience like?
Yeah, similar to Nicole, I was super unorganized and I didn't know what to expect. And so it was definitely just going in and not knowing what to do or what to ask even. And so definitely my second time, I was able to like understand and like kind of learn from my first time. Okay, I know what I want this time, or the questions that I need to be asking.
Yeah, so that's if you look at this little pyramid. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Nicole. If you look at this little pyramid that I put on the screen here, the first time is the foundation. And I'm so sorry, it's gonna be awkward. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be a lot of waiting and then chickening out at the last minute and going to the food bar. I've absolutely been there before. If it makes you feel any better, sometimes even the people from the firms do the same thing, right? The first time the student comes up and talks to them, they're very nervous about it. Then they go to the food bar to kill some time because they're uncomfortable with it as well, right? So not the next few times you do it, it gets better. But the point of me sharing this with all of you is that your first time is the foundation. It's difficult. And exactly like Stephanie kind of mentioned, your second time, a lot more comfortable. You understand kind of what you want to ask, how you want to ask it, all that kind of stuff. The third time, and every time, kind of every subsequent attempt after that, what happens is it's a totally different experience. You are now focusing either on really minute details that you never would have thought of your first time going, or it's just much more comfortable and conversational where you're past the kind of you've met these people before, you have relationships with some of them, you know some of the professionals that you like, you know some of the professionals you don't like, and you also know why. And so your subsequent visits, you're starting to talk about little details that you never would have gotten to in your first couple times, just because there were too many big plate items that you had to get out of the way first. Another way of thinking about this in terms of overcoming that fear of failure, I want all of you to think about your very first semester at CSUN. Then think about the second semester, the third, the fourth, the fifth, however long you've been at CSUN. Each passing semester, I'm not saying that your results as a student may have gotten better. Totally fine. We have different classes. We have different, we have good semesters. We have bad semesters. Totally fine. But I want you to think about how much more comfortable you are with how college operates in your, once you're multiple semesters in, as opposed to your very first semester on campus. Think about that concept and then mix that in with everything that you do with your, like whether you're a tax accountant, an auditor, a consultant, any walk of in the recruiting trail at Meet the Firms, anything that you guys are doing in your life. Your first time doing it is pretty painfully awkward, but we learn and we got to go through that experience to build. Our subsequent attempts are much more comfortable, right? So that's, guys, that's really all I kind of have. So to rehash, we talked about failure itself. Remember, we have to accept that it's going to happen. Everybody fails. It's going to happen to you at some point, and that's okay. Talking about just diving into the pool, right? We've got to really try it. That's the format also changed though. Okay, yep, that's Michael. Yes, that's true. The basic content of the conversations is pretty similar. We'll get to this in a second though. So lastly here, that's that rinse and repeat idea. So these are the three things we talked about, right? You're gonna fail, that's okay. The effort of just jumping in and experiencing it and then adjusting from there, and then rinse and repeat, right? Trying it over again. So guys, any questions at all? I'm going to take the slides down in just a second here. I'm going to move the screen back over so that I can see the bigger tiles. I'll put my email address in the chat box so that you guys have that in case you want to reach out. But we can do this one of two ways. Either one, please feel free just to unmute yourself and ask any questions you want. Or number two, if you don't want to ask out loud, just type it in the chat box, and I'll just read the question and answer it that way. Is that all right?
Yes, that sounds good. Thank you so much, Garrett. It was a great presentation. I feel we all learned a lot.
Yeah, I honestly hope it helps. It's a difficult topic. You know, in my role now with the firm, you know, it's been a few years since I graduated from college. I've gotten a lot of rinse and repeat, right? I've gotten to fail and try again on multiple occasions with a lot of things, and you keep learning, right? And so eventually you kind of you get used to having some success and failing sometimes, and that's okay. And we kind of keep moving, right? So thank you guys for the time and listening. And if you have any questions, I would love to get to
them. Hello, I have a question.
Yeah.
Thanks for the presentation, Gary. Really appreciate it, though. One important aspect that I can take away from this presentation is that you'll learn more from your failures than from your successes. What are your comments about that?
Yeah, well, most of the time, yes. And the reason is when we succeed, we tend not to do the same autopsy that we do on the failure, right? When you fail, it's like, think about like the tests when you fail them. Like a lot of us will like, no way, like really, I scored that. Like you rip the test open, you go through every question, you reread
exactly,
it,
yeah,
you look it up. when you get a good grade on a test, you're just like, nailed it, moving on. Like most of us don't spend a lot of time on the diagnostic going over the successes. We tend to just believe in ourselves where, yeah, now every once in a while, it'll be like, I completely guessed on that and got it right. That does not mean I know it, but whatever, I got it right, cool. Most of the time, once we succeed, touchdown, move on, right? So we don't revisit and we don't review as much as we do when we fail, and that's why I think you learn more from the failures than you do from the success.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. That's also a good point to realize why I think a lot of times the failures stick with us longer. We hold on to them longer than we hold on to wins. Because remember, if you hold on to a win and if you're the guy that keeps bringing up how in your middle school basketball league you won the championship, all of us are just like, okay, dude, yeah, we get it. That was like 8 years ago, right? Whereas like or vice versa, if you bring up the failures, yeah, we tend to say, hey man, let it go. It happened a long time ago. Move on, right? And that's just to say we tend to hold on to revisit the failures more than we do the good times. And I think that's kind of part of it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And also like like our failures in life, though, whether it's professional or academic, though, they make more of an impression on us than our successes.
Yeah, I think that's a weird psychological thing to deal that all of us deal with. But I think once you take a step back, now it's hard to like evaluate yourself honestly, right? We're all biased for different reasons. Some of us like hanging on to happy memories. Some of us like letting go of sad memories, vice versa, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, the psychological element of all of this is critically important in terms of building the confidence. But once you realize like it's all psychological, both the good and the bad, that kind of frees you a little bit to kind of like pursue different ways of building confidence.
Appreciate the insight. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Christian, I mean, look, in my personal life, I completely agree with this. Like some of the failures, I'll be very open and honest and say it's funny. I joke with Stuart about this all the time because Stuart Freed at the Career Center always kind of jokes about how students all think that they want Big Four and then they're ignoring other firms because of that. Like I did too. Like I sometimes I feel scared to tell him that. I was just like, look, when I was a student, I absolutely wanted to work for a Big Four. I was crushed when I didn't get it, so I settled for like the next biggest firm. I get it, right? Those failures, though, absolutely for me opened doors to other things that I ended up really enjoying. And again, the point of that story is not to tell you that like if you're recruiting with a Big Four, shame on you, like you shouldn't like that. Far from it. My point is that like we each have kind of experiences, and there are experiences and bad experiences, and what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for the other person, right? Whether that's my best friends or my family members or whatever. And it's kind of meant to say that yeah, when you fail at one path, it sets you on a different path that might be better, it might be worse, it might, who knows? It's just a different path that still leads to enjoyment, happiness, and success and fulfillment, right? So that's I do think kind of that's a mindset though, Christian. I think especially when you look at like that's if you can program yourself to feel like failure is not again failure, but a different opportunity for something else, that's tough to do, but I think very moving and very powerful. So I think that's a really good point. Michael, let's see. How do you as a recruiter see through some of them? Yeah. Yep. To be very honest with everyone, I'm very sympathetic for people that are very nervous. There are people at firms who are not sympathetic, who are kind of tough cookies, right? Like you got to be on and you got to be performing at your best in order for them to see you like that. Now, in my opinion, I think the more times you get to see a firm, the more we get to know if that nervousness was just nervousness the first time or if this is a bigger issue. Really hard to know this on one meeting. And that's why I would encourage all of you multiple visits with a firm or multiple visits with people from a firm to build a relationship instead of, look, the 10-minute slot online for a Handshake for the virtual meet the firms, pretty tough. right? So let's see if they're just nervous or lacking confidence rather than bad. Yeah, so I think you first have to get past the nervousness or the lack of confidence, and that only happens through subsequent visits. At some point, you may realize if they're a bad fit for other reasons, but certainly not the initial nervousness or lack of confidence. Their first impression is practicable, though. Right now, you will only get one first impression with the person you're talking to, yes, but that's the whole point of, to me, of Meet the Firms, and why I think some people would disagree with me on this, but I think you want to practice first with some firms that aren't on your list or firms that you don't know. And look, not to say that those are lesser firms or that they're undeserving. Look, you may practice with a firm that was meant to be just a warm-up round and discover, holy crap, I really like these guys, they're awesome. But if it goes south and it doesn't go well, this is the whole point of practicing, right? You figure out what works and what doesn't work, so that the time that you get to the firm that you think you really care about, or the one that's important to you, you now have some experience to make a better first impression. But you're right, and that's my heart goes out to everyone here. First impressions in recruiting are pretty tough. Actually, first impressions in now, luckily for other parts of life, you get a chance to make up for the first impression. But especially in a recruiting process, there are a lot of people that once you've botched that first impression, there's no recovering. Now, not to scare you, there are other people where if you botch that first impression, totally fine. You'll see them later, or you'll see them a second time, and you'll make a better impression, and they'll change their mind on how they think about it. Right? So not everyone immediately writes you off after the importance of that first impression. Okay. All right, next up, let's see. That's a really good one. Comparing yourself to others in your cohort, or people in your age group. Yep. Look, that is a fantastic question, Dixon. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. This is super hard, and it actually gets more messed up once you join firms. I'm so sorry to share all of this with you, but once you join a firm, and especially if it's a bigger firm, your cohort is bigger, right? Although, heck, it might be worse at a smaller firm. If your cohort is 4 people and you're the only one that doesn't promote in those 4, ooh, pretty brutal, right? Vice versa, if you do promote and your cohort doesn't, that creates a different unique issue as well, right? The hardest thing here, I think, is to not compare yourself with other people. You are on your own path, okay? Your happiness is not comparable to somebody else's happiness. Ooh, I get to mix in this social media slight here as well. Just because somebody looks super happy on social media doesn't mean they are more or less happy than you, right? So it's a personal game. And trust me, I'm saying this knowing full well that I do this with my friends and my family members. This is not an easy thing to kind of focus it on yourself, but so much of this is on your own development. And for example, if at an accounting firm, a colleague promotes before you do, and it takes you an extra year or 2, in the grand scheme of roughly a 20 to 30 year career in public accounting, what difference does a year or 2 make? And that's when you're younger, it makes more of a big difference, because as a percentage of your life, it's a larger percentage. But as you get older, that becomes a smaller percentage of your life, and a year or 2 isn't a huge deal in the big picture. And again, I am not telling you that when this first happened to me, when a colleague of mine got promoted and I didn't, I wasn't pissed off. I was. But the funniest thing that happened is in my annual review, when they were sharing this with me, my response was like, listen, I'm going to be pissed off for about 2 days, maybe 3. After that, I'll be totally fine. You don't have to worry about me. I'll get on with it. But I have pride. I have an ego. I am competitive. I do want to do the best that I can and promote quickly. So it stings a little bit, but it's only temporary, and I'll get right back on the horse and I'll keep trying. Rinse and repeat, right? We get a chance at this every day. But the partners laughed when I told them that, and they kind of said, like, that's kind of what we wanted to hear. And also, they were like, frankly, we would have been really nervous if you just weren't upset about this at all. I was like, it's fine. Like, I don't want this to spiral out of control and be negative. But the point of all of this is you have to try to focus on yourself. And for those of you who have played sports, I was in the marching band in high school, so I watched a lot of sports. I never played a lot of sports. Competing is difficult because it's not about being the best in terms of being better than other people. It's about trying to pull the best performance out of yourself. And look, if we're being brutally honest, your best may not be better than somebody else's best. That's okay. But the whole concept here is that we ourselves are improving individually in our own life and in our own race. And that's a really hard thing to kind of deal with in terms of comparing yourself to other people, but you have to try to focus on yourself. That's a really good comment. Michael, if you're looking for happiness, you might be in the wrong profession. I completely disagree with that. That's a very cynical and very negative comment to throw out there in general. And I think if you're looking for negativity, you can find that in any profession, in any person. If you're looking for happiness, you can also find that in any profession, in any person. So this is a personal choice that I think all of us make. And I don't, that one's a tough one, right? Happiness does come from within though. So I do think that what you bring to the table has a lot bigger impact on your happiness than necessarily your profession. Let's see, any other, okay. Yes. Angel, yeah, that's a good one. Every day is the only day that we have to live, right? There's no sense being stuck in the past. There's no sense being lost in the future. We only really get kind of the day that we have in front of us. So we all do the best that we can. Some days that's good and things work, and some days it's not so good. Okay, anyone else, any other questions at all? Good chat questions. Really helpful stuff. Again, this is all of this, the building of the confidence is kind of like you have to like put forth an effort and try and realize that even for all of us, for the most part, our failures in life aren't going to kill us. Right now, not to be doom and gloom here, but there are some. So one of the things that I will always joke about with this profession in accounting, when we make a mistake, no one dies. Like, I don't understand how doctors or nurses or physician's assistants deal with that kind of pressure. Or for some of them, when they do make a mistake, people can die and do die. Talk about lacking confidence. Or by the way, do you want a surgeon who is confident or lacks confidence? Right? Do you want a surgeon that's arrogant, that thinks that they're the best person out there, or one that's like, oh, you know what, I'm really not the best. I'm probably not the best person for this surgery, right? That confidence goes a long way in everything that we do. But the point for me was always, luckily in this line of work, when your debits don't equal your credits, nobody dies. And so for me personally, I could not handle the anxiety, pressure, and stress of being a surgeon or a doctor, where if I do make a mistake, somebody could potentially die. My hat's off to those people where that's difficult to me. In this profession, at least when we make mistakes, we have a chance to recover and no one's going to get hurt. Make sense, guys? Anybody else? By the way, these are all fantastic questions. So thanks for sharing. Anyone else have any questions?
Well, you said that most of the things that didn't go well, we can, try again and do it over. And that's a very good point. But let's say some things you can't redo, like simple thing, maybe simple, but let's say getting a much lower grade on the exam and eventually in class and it stays in your GPA and something, just people have a hard time getting over with. What would you recommend with that? With something that you can't change?
Yeah. So for your good question, Mariana. So I'm going to keep this specifically to public accounting for now, or accounting. Let's say you go through CSUN and you either don't get any job offers, or the job offers you do get are from firms that you really don't want to work for, or you bomb tests and you graduate with a suboptimal GPA, right? Whatever that may be for you. The next thing becomes the CPA exam, right? And in my personal opinion, that you can pass that exam. You have to want to pass the exam, and I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but to me, human beings are fascinating. When we really want something, and I mean really want it, we're pretty capable of getting it. Now, look, if this is like, I really want to be an NBA player, like, not gonna happen. I'm 5'11" and not athletic. Not gonna happen. The CPA exam is not like that at all. Okay, the CPA exam you can try multiple times, no matter how young or how old you are. You can set aside time for it. There are ways of getting that exam done if, you know, even if it's difficult. Okay, but if you graduate from CSUN with no job offers and crummy grades, so that no one, it's difficult to hire you, your next step becomes passing the CPA exam. If you can pass the CPA exam, and all of you can, all of a sudden those firms that were ignoring you or declining you are going to come crawling back and come calling you because you passed your exam. So my advice on something like getting a bad test score or getting bad grades or not recruiting with the firm that you want is go pass your CPA exam. Again, very easy to say, not as easy to do. I failed the exam 5 times and eventually passed it. But that's the next step, right? And you've got, that becomes your single focus and goal is passing the CPA exam. And then once you pass the CPA exam, I think you'll see a lot more success in getting a job with a firm. So that would be kind of like, you've got to let go and move on to the next thing, right? But specifically with public accounting, you'll have an option to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's very good to hear. It's very comforting to know there is a way to fix it in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Good question though. Yeah, and it's there's always a plan. There's always a path forward. There's always something you can do to keep moving forward.
So another question I have is, like, let's say somebody has a fear of public speaking. Like, what are the specific things would you recommend doing? Do you just jump into speaking, or do you practice on your own? What would you recommend?
Yeah, so that depends. There are ideas of getting used to talk. Like, there's a couple different ways you can do this. One is, yes, just jump into speaking in front of people and figure it out, and you can get better that way, right? You learn from the mistakes you make and eventually get better. You can kind of ease into it where, say, for example, there's a topic that you really like talking about. You practice that in front of your friends or your family. You're comfortable talking in front of them. You try to replicate the same content that you're talking about in front of a group of people you don't know, so that at least the content that you're talking about, you're more confident in than you would be if it was content you're not confident in. And like all things, practice makes perfect, right? So at first we start off with reading a script. Maybe then we move to bullet points. Maybe at some point what I used to do when I was in high school is I had a teacher, it was a public speaking class. He had a jar in the front of the class, and we all would write, you'd write one word on a scrap of paper, crumple it up and throw it in the jar. And what he would do is for 30 seconds, you had to get up in front of the class, you reach into the jar, you pick out a topic, and it could be ice cream, right? And for 30 seconds, you have to talk about ice cream. And at first you kind of struggle with it. You're just like, what do you want me to say about ice cream? It's okay. Yeah, it's there. It exists. You eat ice cream. Some people like ice cream. Some people don't. But then at some point, you start realizing that you have to fill the 30 seconds with words and time. That's the whole point of the exercise. So you start throwing stuff at it, right? And at first it doesn't make sense. You're speaking about, like, your sentences don't make sense. It's not interesting. It's not compelling at all. But you start practicing this enough and you start to get used to impromptu speaking of, ice cream. I love ice cream. It's a great dessert. It's one of my favorite desserts. A lot of people say that they like chocolate ice cream instead of vanilla ice cream. But for me personally, I've always loved vanilla ice cream. Sometimes if I get to put toppings on top of it, I really enjoy it. But I've always really enjoyed eating ice cream. It's always a treat for me. You get used to being able to impromptu speak about something with more confidence, but it's especially if you know something about it, right? If I write down on a scrap of paper, I don't know, like New Zealand sunset. I've never seen a New Zealand sunset. I don't know, like, it would be very difficult for me to impromptu speak on that. But once you start talking about things that you're confident in and you know about, it goes from 30 seconds to a longer stretch of time to be able to talk about it comfortably in front of people. That is one method to practice public speaking, to get more comfortable with public speaking. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. That's a very interesting approach. And 30 seconds seems like not a very long thing. It's
right. So baby steps. We start with a short amount of time on something, and you can do this one of two ways. Obviously, talking for 10 minutes about something you like is still challenging to fill 10 minutes, but to speak about 30 seconds about something you like is easier. To speak about 30 seconds on something you don't know a lot about is difficult, but at least, hey, it's only 30 seconds, right? We can fumble through 30 seconds on almost any topic. Right?
Yes, definitely. So did any of your students in that class try to put some really difficult topics so somebody pick it up and have nothing to say about it?
Yeah, but eventually what happens is like high school students like that are very competitive, and they're also basically this exercise taught you to get really good at bullshitting. which was the point of the public speaking. That was a debate class. So like that was the point of all of this, is like your ability to think on your feet and form coherent sentences on things became part of what that was. So yes, you had people that would write ridiculous topics, and you have to try to like talk about, I don't know, Kenya's policy on like carrying guns, and it's like I don't know, but like you're forced into figuring something out.
Okay, that's nice. Very nice exercise. Well, we have a couple more minutes. I don't know if anyone has more questions. Please
let me see if I
ask
can
now.
get through. There's one in here. Parents have tough expectations. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So yeah, and parents are really difficult. It can be difficult to deal with. When I was recruiting, my father is a retired firefighter. I love the man dearly. He's one of the biggest influences in my life, but he never went to college, and he certainly didn't study accounting. So when it came time for me to pick what firm I was going to go join, his heart was in the right place, but I don't, looking back on it now, it's like, okay, his advice wasn't necessarily the best. So that's kind of like, your parents can be difficult on their expectations or what they're thinking. Remember, all of us are just on our own path, and there are times where you'll sync up and agree with your parents, and they'll agree with you, and there's going to be times where you're butting heads over stuff, and that's really hard to basically respectfully say, I know you love me, I know you care about me, I love you too, I'm not doing what you're telling me to do on this specific case, right? That is not an easy thing to do. But I think it's important to realize, as you grow, you're on your own path, right? What is the typical wait time after the first interview? It depends. It depends kind of like when these things happen, what the firms are doing, right? The firms may try to be doing all of their first round interviews before they reach out to anyone. The firms may be reaching out to you like within a day or two after the first interview, maybe a week after the first interview. There's a lot of different ways of doing this. So I don't think there's necessarily a typical wait time, but if you're curious, you can always just email people and say, hey, look, it's been a couple of weeks since I interviewed. I just want to make sure you've got everything you need. Is there anything else I can get for you? Let me know, right? You can always reach out to kind of check up. I think that, okay, yeah, that's about it. Anyone else, any last minute questions here? Cool.
Well, we're almost running out of time, so we are going to take a picture right now.